Okay. Thank you again. Appreciate being here. As Ron mentioned, my name is Brian Stevens. I am with SolarEdge. I am a C&I sales manager for the Southwest. So basically, I cover California, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, and Texas. And I support all things on the three-phase or commercial side. Although obviously SolarEdge is the #1 inverter manufacturer for both residential and commercial, I focus primarily on commercial. My background has been in sustainability for about a little over a decade now. Some areas of somewhat, I shouldn't say expertise, but prevalence would be, distributed generation, obviously, energy storage applications, commercial real estate investment as it relates to sustainability, and then financial modeling and analysis. And we'll talk a bit about that later on in the presentation, because in the end, the numbers matter, right? And how it affects the bottom line is important. I've also included my email address. I know we kind of have a short venue here, so if you do have questions that we didn't get a chance to address here, please feel free to email me and I'd be happy to respond. So let's talk about real quick SolarEdge in terms of numbers and what we do. So as it stands today, and this number is probably a little bit out of date because this grows quickly, and I think I got this about 2 weeks ago, so it's probably already grown. But right now, we're about 101 million optimizers sold throughout the world. And that's kind of our primary IP, is that optimization. And what Ron was alluding to before when it comes to satellites, originally we were doing DC optimization on satellites. And so that's how the technology was originally developed. We have 2.9 million systems monitored worldwide. We'll go into a little bit more detail about that monitoring portal, but 2.9 million worldwide, where they can see basically all the way down to the module level, which is another specific selling point of SolarEdge. 4.2 million inverters shipped, 36.9 gigawatts of systems out in the world. We have a little over 4,500 employees. That's going to grow substantially over the next year, probably by almost double worldwide. We're in 36 countries, physically present in 36 countries. And we have 445 current patents with 426 pending. And again, so to kind of come back to that, we are not your father's inverter manufacturer, right? We are a unique technology in the market. And we'll kind of go into more detail about what makes our secret sauce special. But it is completely different IP to a standard string inverter that you would see today. From a financial standpoint and bankability, just in the previous quarter, we shipped $836 million worth of product, which in the end, by revenue, makes us the #1 inverter solar company in the world. So when you're talking about insurance companies and bankability with SolarEdge, you pretty much can't go wrong. As far as global presence, again, we work with over 45,000 installers worldwide. We're physically present in 36 countries, like I mentioned. We have regional service centers all around the world with systems installed in over 133 countries. So let's kind of talk now about what the SolarEdge solution is. But first, we kind of have to look at what are the primary tenets, what was the development behind SolarEdge, and what did we care about most, right? And so there's 4 primary areas where we specifically shine compared to other standard inverters in the market. First off, and primarily, and there are 2 specifically I'm going to talk about today, which is the energy yield, meaning we increase production, and the advanced safety. So those are the 2 primary areas we're going to talk about today. But because of our design, we also substantially reduce the balance of system costs associated with installing solar, as well as because of that, again, module level granularity of data, we substantially lower O&M costs of maintaining these systems over the life of the system over 20 years. So how do we do that, right? So let's look at basically a typical solution when you're looking at a solar, in this case, this is a rooftop. You basically have your panels on the roof coming down to an inverter, which does a DC to AC conversion and sends the electricity to the grid or uses it locally. And you have some maybe sensors and some monitoring, right? That's a typical solution. How we differ, though, is we break up that system into 2 parts. And we talked about those optimizers on the first slide that we've shipped 101 million worldwide. So basically, this inverter is still doing what other inverters do, meaning it's converting DC to AC, and it's communicating with the monitoring portal. But beyond that, everything else is done here at the optimizer level for every 2 modules. So that means maximum power point tracking, That means voltage control. That means safety in terms of shutting off in case of an event that, first responders need to be on the scene and things like that. That is what really differentiates how our system works compared to others. So there's a thing, a term in the industry called mismatch. And basically that just simply means that not every module is the same. So let's say this rooftop was all 500 watt modules. In reality, what you pull out of the box, you're going to have 499 watt, you're going to have 501, and a variety, right? And generally speaking, with string inverters, they all track on an individual string. So let's say this particular section right here was one string. They all track to the lowest performing module. It's called maximum power point tracking. That's just the nature of how string inverters work. So that means if one of these modules is performing actually at 498 watts, that means the rest of that string tops at 498 as well. By moving the maximum power point tracking from here to here, that means when you have an underperforming module, it only affects the module next to it, not the rest of the string. So when we say that a SolarEdge system produces more, we're not actually saying that we're going to drag more energy out of the modules. What we're saying is we're going to eliminate the impedance of the lower performing modules, right? So they do not affect the overall system. Additionally, then, because we have that monitoring capability and data down to this level, that means from a monitoring platform standpoint, you have that visibility as well. So you would actually see that one module is underperforming. Let's say it's dirt, let's say it's a blown diode, whatever it is, you would easily know by looking at the monitoring portal that module 3 on string 1 on inverter 2 has an issue, right? So we call it know before you go. That's that O&M saving standpoint, right? You can actually know well before you send a truck out to do any kind of maintenance on your site that here's exactly what needs to be fixed. Here's the parts you need, go do it, come back, be done. Whereas with a standard string inverter, all you would know is that there is an issue with this one string, right? So first you have to truck roll out there to investigate the problem, find out what the issue is, and then hopefully you have the parts on hand to make the repair. If not, now you're talking about 2 truck rolls to fix the same problem. So those are some of the kind of key areas where SolarEdge kind of stands out in the market. So now let's talk about, like I said, the 2 parts I really want to focus on today, which is that production difference and here, in this case, safety. So it's built into our DNA from day one that safety is a key component of our solution. What you call rapid shutdown today, which is a standard now in electrical code, which means basically that within a certain amount of time, your system has to be safe for first responders. Let's say you have an emergency at your site, you have service crews, there's a fire in the building and fire crews have to go on the roof, things like that. It needs to be made safe for those people to be around it. Rapid shutdown does that. Safe DC is the birth of rapid shutdown effectively. Another area of specific concern are arc faults, right? So when it comes to, in general, systems are extremely safe. When you hear about any kind of dramatic, thermal events or things like that have happened in the past, it's generally not because of the system itself. It has to do with wiring, right? Someone didn't connect a connector completely, a wire was cut by an animal, things like that, right? What that leads to then is an arc fault. The electrical current heats up, you cause an arc fault, that causes thermal damage that can potentially lead to a fire. With SolarEdge, that can't happen. Literally, we will detect an arc fault as it happens and the system shuts down automatically. And because inherently we can shut down all the way down to the module level, that immediately stops any thermal event from going beyond just a heated wire. Along those lines, we also have built-in temperature monitoring in the inverters themselves, so at the connection points there, as well as on the optimizers. So again, when we see dramatic changes in temperature, now instead of waiting for the arc fault to happen, we can actually kind of sense, all right, this particular sensor is getting way too hot compared to the other ones around it. That might be leading to an arc fault. Let's go ahead and shut down, notify the asset owner to take a look, all right? And then again, all comes down to this final point of module level monitoring. That safety access or that safe reliability is all built into the point where you can see it from your computer, from your home, from your desktop, from your phone at any given time. So from an O&M and support standpoint, life is substantially easier with SolarEdge.
Hey, Brian.
Yep.
Should
I
go
see you have some questions. So.
Yep. One good question was, how does the inverter detect an electric arc?
So there's UL codes around that actually that specifically dictate how it can do that. Although I'm an A-list speaker here, I'm not the A-list engineer, so I can't go into great detail about how that works. But we comply with the UL that supports arc fault notification. I can go into more detail later via email with anybody that does have that specific question. I just can't intelligently answer it myself.
Okay, no problem. All right, I'll make sure. Shagun, who's I believe in Sweden, we have a great international audience. Sometimes I'm always amazed that sustainability is a way to break down barriers across countries. Here in Israel, we have a gentleman who just joined, excited from Iran, and I've seen this in many cases. When it gets down to the excitement of technology and issues that confront our planet, it's good to see common interest in these areas.
But again, so again, feel free to email me. I'll be happy to supply all the UL information regarding that and the specific case studies and white papers we have it on as well. Bottom line, though, I guess the best way to really describe it, and I'll knock on wood now because I'm saying this out loud, SolarEdge has never had a thermal event that converted to a fire, right, that caused any kind of damage. That is a claim that we can make today. Now, obviously, these are electronic components. They will overheat. There will be thermal events. Components will burn on occasion, but whether it's bad wiring, any number of issues, damage during transit, things like that. But the measures we have in place prevent that from getting beyond anything other than a simple thermal event. So what is Safe DC? Again, this is kind of in the DNA of what SolarEdge is. And basically it says that, and this was, again, to protect first responders coming to a site, to protect maintenance workers on a site, that anytime the inverter loses connectivity to an optimizer, that optimizer shuts down to 1 volt DC, which is safe to touch, basically. So in other words, if an emergency responder, again, is on a roof responding to a fire, he falls, his axe cuts a wire, and he inadvertently touches it, he's not going to be caused any harm. He'll have a minor jolt and get up and get back to continuing to fight whatever fire is there or respond to whatever event is taking place. So this also means if there's a loss of power to the grid, also means any kind of insulation faults or if there's flooding, any other number of events that can take place that can impact an inverter's ability to perform. That constant communication between inverter and optimizer is what insulates that from happening, right? So in other words, again, if the communication is lost, it's all reduced to 1 volt. Because let me back up real quick. So let's when we talk about this safety, I think I mentioned this earlier. Even if this is down on a standard solution, all these panels are still producing. You're not turning off the sun. You're not stopping these modules from producing electricity, meaning also all the wiring in between them is still carrying a substantial amount of voltage, which is why rapid shutdown as a code was developed. We developed Safe DC for this reason as well. The code then followed. But that's why. Again, this is basically a giant battery. So even when this is not accepting the power and running it to the grid, these panels are producing. And so you need something at the module level to ensure that that electricity is now at a safe level. So as far as going on into 2023, even though we are the safest solution on the market, we are always constantly working to make it safer. So our new optimizer will be called the S series, and that S stands for Sense Connect. So we already have temperature sensors in the optimizers themselves, but now, again, with what we talked about with arc faults, where they tend to happen at the connectors, meaning if this connector was not quite plugged in all the way, a little loose, or gets wear and tear, an animal chews it up, any number of different things, we now have temperature sensors at this level. So instead of just waiting for the arc fault to happen, seeing that it might happen and shutting down, now we're going to see dramatic change in temperature on this connector versus the other connectors on the optimizers around it. And again, we can shut down even before the arc fault happens. More importantly, we can tell you exactly where it is. We can give you a precise location to say, again, optimizer 5 on inverter 6 on this rooftop has a loose connection that can lead to an arc fault. We've seen a temperature spike. You need to get out there and take a look. All right. So again, not only do we have in place systems to identify when an arc fault happens and shut down to prevent any damage, we are now increasing our ability to even detect before it happens and stop it ahead of time. I'll kind of take a quick break there just to ask Ron, are there any other questions? I see there's 3 in the Q&A. Just want to make sure if there's any I need to cover.
Yes. One is, how do you go about installing SolarEdge inverters as a retrofit for an existing installation who wants greater efficiency?
Yes, and we're seeing that actually a lot for 2 reasons. One, for greater efficiency in production on distressed assets, sites where an inverter broke down, they're having problems, it's not producing as much as they wanted, and also for systems where they feel it's not safe enough, right? So we've got a few big box stores and things like that have experienced some less than savory results using other systems, and they've now retrofitted using SolarEdge. It is a process, right? So it is, you do need to put optimizers on every 2 modules, and the difference is that you do have some flexibility in that design, right? Because of the way our systems work, you can have the inverters almost anywhere. You don't have to have them physically close, so you can have them on the ground floor, within the utility room, on the rooftop versus up on the roof, either way. But when it comes to doing that retrofit, you just need to work closely with SolarEdge. That is part of doing business with SolarEdge. In other words, when you buy components from SolarEdge, you're not just buying the parts and pieces, you're also buying the service that comes with it. So we have pre-designed support to help you to look over single line drawings with our engineering team. Then we also have post-design support, meaning installation, where we'll provide both in-person and online training, as well as be there for site walks, and most importantly, be there for actual commissioning, right? Because we're not perfect. We're going to have a few optimizers, for instance, that might fail out of the box because of damage due to shipping and other things. But having a SolarEdge representative there the day you're commissioning can be extremely helpful, because if you do have those, he can make replacements right there on the spot instead of waiting. So it can be a huge help. The bottom line is, involve SolarEdge up front. We'll work closely with your installer if you're the asset owner. We'll work closely with you if you're the actual installer, and we'll make sure that it's done right. And then we'll also protect that asset for the life of the system. And I have a slide later on that talks about that, how we financially back it as well.
And one other thing too, I know Corbin, who's going to be our next speaker with OneSource, a key distributor partner of SolarEdge. And one of the other questions that came up was, well, how do you configure and integrate your inverter with your photovoltaic panels? Where do you place them on the roof, the angle? That's where Corbin and his team can get involved, working hand in hand with Brian and SolarEdge to create that integrated solution. And then Corbin can then figure out, well, here's the way this could feed in with your microgrid, with your batteries and things like that. So stay tuned, but those are great questions. And let me turn it back over to Brian to make sure that we can get through this on a timely basis, but this is great stuff.
Yeah, and we look forward to working with all parties involved. We don't want to just be a manufacturer that sells product. We want to be involved all the way up to commissioning so that these projects are successful. So let's talk now about what we mean by more energy. And I kind of talked about the issue of mismatch, but what we like to do is let's take an actual project, right? So we're going to look at a Southern California car dealership. This particular one was a 526 kW system that was all carports. And the way we can kind of spell out that production difference is we use PV6, right? So it's kind of the de facto third-party tool used to determine the potential production of a system. That's what most financiers use to back up their PPAs, things like that. So if you're working with a third-party bank to confirm production over the life of the system, that's what they're going to want to see is PV6. So that's what we use. So this is looking at, and it doesn't matter who the other string inverter is, right? You're going to see this production difference with SolarEdge versus any string inverter, just because, again, that mismatch is inherent, right, that we avoid. So in this particular case, year 1, we saw a 3% increase in production. By year 20, it was 6.6. And the reason it grows over time, and the reason we use this year 20 number from PVSys, is because PVSys takes into account degradation dispersion, which means, yes, all these modules are going to degrade, but they're going to degrade at different paces. So that mismatch we talked about, where one is performing at 500 watts, one's performing at 498, that disparity now grows over time. And so again, by year 20, you'll see around 6.6%. Another thing that's important that I wanted to use this particular case is we also mitigate shading, right? We can't, eliminate shading completely, but the beauty of SolarEdge is when you do have shading, it doesn't affect the rest of the modules on your system, whereas with another string inverter, it would. So in this case, we're almost half of the impact of the shade that took place on that site. Overall, this came to a 4.7% increase in production over the life of the system. And what I'd like to do when I see this number is let's create a cash flow now. Because that's, again, the financial side of my mind that wants to say, okay, what does that mean in terms of dollars? So let's look at that, right? When we have year 1 and we have year 20, it's pretty easy to create a cash flow now that represents all that increased production over those 20 years. There's two numbers that are important here. One is this number here, the 705,000 kilowatt hours of increased production. If you notice, it's really close to that final year of the standard string inverter, right? So we're basically giving you a 21st year of energy production compared to a string inverter. In this case, this is in California. So the cost for the electricity, it was a PPA rate for this particular customer actually, started at 12 cents and had a 2% increase escalator over the life. So that means that we were a net present value benefit of $74,000 day 1. So as soon as that system is commissioned, it's worth $74,000 more using SolarEdge than any other string inverter. That's really powerful when you're talking to an asset owner, to a system user, to the off-taker of the energy, right? This is real dollars. And a lot of times when we do this comparison with customers to show them, even if you zeroed out the CapEx of the string inverter we're competing against, it still makes financial sense to use SolarEdge, meaning even if the other inverter were offered for free, you were still better off in the overall life of the system.
So the great thing is when you use SolarEdge, your CFO loves you because you're a big star and you're saving money. And the CEO and the VP of sustainability love you. So when they present to the board about how they're now such a green-oriented corporation, you've got you're killing two birds with one stone. So that's not the best analogy, but you get double the benefit with two key constituencies or stakeholders who can benefit from SolarEdge. Yeah,
the joke I use internally is when you're talking about an asset owner, a sustainability manager, things like that, you're never going to get fired for selecting SolarEdge, right? Even if things go bad, the idea of using SolarEdge in the first place is still the best path forward. So the last thing I want to talk about, actually the second to last thing, we'll talk a little bit about what's coming up in the future as well, but protecting your investment. So I know a lot of customers get a little bit nervous when they think about all these individual pieces on these panels that represent what they consider a single point of failure. In reality, it's really only a single point of failure for two modules. But again, if you have 5,000 modules on your rooftop, that means you have 2,500 optimizers. And that can create some consternation for customers. So we created this program called the AdvanceEdge program that basically we're going to put our money where our mouth is for the first 2 years of the system. In other words, so we're going to provide a subsidy for either an EPC or an O&M provider, the person who's maintaining the system, to truck roll every 6 months to do basic maintenance work. And then if in that time period, in that 6-month time period, an optimizer fails, you're not going to truck roll for it. You're going to wait till the end of that 6 months. Then you'll truck roll, you do your standard maintenance, and then replace that optimizer. And we will track the performance that it should have provided based on the optimizers around it, and literally cut you a check for that lost production. So basically, we're literally putting our money where our mouth is, that we're going to cover the loss of production for the first 2 years due to a downed optimizer. We do this for two reasons. One is, again, to give you peace of mind that if an optimizer fails, you're going to be made whole financially. But more importantly, it shows that the loss of an optimizer or two is actually not the end of the world, right? So we just generated a report for one of our customers. They had a 4 megawatt rooftop, some 6,000 plus optimizers, and during a 6-month period of the AdvanceEdge program, one optimizer failed. And it failed, I think, at month 2. So there was 4 months basically of lost production from that optimizer. They had told us what the rate they were paying for that energy was. And so the end result was, from one downed optimizer on that system, we cut them a check for $12, right? So it's twofold. One, it provides that peace of mind, but at the same time, informs you that the loss of an optimizer is not the end of the world. It doesn't really impact you financially. It is not really a single point of failure for your system. It is just a single point of failure for 2 modules. And when you're talking about a megawatt type of size system, a single or 1 or 2 modules of lost production does not impact your overall number very much at all. And in fact, it's well within that 2% increase we provide anyway, right? So this is kind of, like I said, a dual purpose, peace of mind, as well as to confirm to customers that, you're not going to get hurt too badly by a single optimizer failing. So lastly, what's coming up in 2023? I don't know how important this will be to customers on this particular call, but there are two areas where we're planning on growing into. We're going to be releasing a 330 kW inverter to support the large scale utility market as well as large community solar. So for ground mounts of 10 megawatts and higher, you want to look at the 330K inverter, which has all the same benefits of our current solution. And when you're talking about these large ground mounts, again, that monitoring portal is huge. When you're looking at a 50 megawatt ground mount that covers, several hundred acres, and you need to find a couple different, modules that are failing or what have you that would normally affect dramatic amounts of your production, and now they don't because of SolarEdge, and now you can pinpoint where they are. That's going to be pretty huge for those asset owners. And then for California specifically, again, a big market for me, agri-PV is going to be huge as well, just from the water retention alone. So agri-PV, we see anywhere between 14 and 20% of water savings by installing SolarEdge over your crops, or solar, not necessarily SolarEdge, but installing solar over your crops. It doesn't impede growth because we can actually, do the perfect tilt to make sure they get the sunlight they need, but it also then prevents evaporation and then improves your water quality, or not water quality, but water retention, which is going to be huge for California growers. So, like I said, in summary, the two areas we really want to talk about today were the energy yield and the advanced safety, both of which hopefully would give you and your asset owners peace of mind with your PV systems, whether they're rooftop, carport, ground mount, photovoltaics on a lake, what have you. We can support any of these solutions and provide a return on your investment much greater than any other inverter on the market.